So I'm a little tired, but I haven't done an update in almost a month, so I figured it'd be good to just look at what's going on in the astrology. Today is August 17th, 2020. Um, and yeah, this is the chart for today. This is like just after midnight today. So I'll go to noon. But just for this foreseeable future, well, no, I guess I'll start with today actually. Today we've got Sun in Leo, but we're almost at the end of Leo already since it's August 17th. The Sun will enter Virgo in a few days. We've got Mercury conjunct the Sun today, so Mercury is direct and it's at its full speed right now, actually, and it's passing the Sun. And just as it's doing that, you can see the moon is right here. So the moon has just entered Leo yesterday, I think. Yeah, yeah. Or maybe early, like last night, early this morning. Um, and the moon is gonna catch up, and I'll just show you what happens in 2 days. So tomorrow, August 18th, the Sun, Mercury, and the Moon are all pretty tightly conjunct. They'll all be at 26, 27 degrees at one point tomorrow. I think tomorrow evening. Yeah, right here you've got. So this is 9 or 10 p.m. Pacific time. You've got Sun 26 degrees Leo, Moon 27, Mercury 28 degrees Leo. So they're all basically conjunct pretty tightly, and they're all trining Mars pretty tightly because Mars is at 24 degrees Aries. So you have a pretty fiery time, and it's sort of a new reset point where, and it's not a super extreme thing, but it's just that because this is fire and because there's Mercury conjunct the new moon, because that's what a moon sun conjunction is, a new moon. So there's a new moon 26 degrees Leo, and because Mercury is conjunct this new moon, it just makes it a little bit more potent. It's not super tied into a lot of other planets. It is quincunx Saturn, but quincunx isn't a really strong aspect, so not a super big deal, but a little bit more potent than your average new moon, just because Mercury is conjunct the sun at the same time and the moon. Yeah, so it would start Leo season more so. A lot of times, like a sign might start when the sun enters that sign, but then it really starts to get going when the new moon happens in that sign. But again, like I said, we're almost at the end of Leo, so you might get a burst of Leo energy, but it'll only be for the next few days, several days before the sun enters Virgo. And then, trining Mars, that kind of adds more fiery energy. Not a super big deal. It might be kind of a breath of fresh air in a way, just because this year's astrology is really low in fire. There's none of the outer planets are in fire at all outside of Mars. So that's Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto aren't in fire signs at all this entire year. So it might be kind of nice actually that since we've been lacking the fire element all year, to get some sort of spontaneity and some passion and some fiery energy. Um, yeah, so it probably would be much needed. It probably wouldn't be too aggressive or domineering. I think it might give us some like much needed energy and enthusiasm. But nothing major going on, just because um, everything, like I've said before, everything is happening sort of in relation to these three planets here: Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter in Capricorn. So, so basically, the way I look at it is look at these inner planets that are moving more quickly, and then how do they relate to these guys that are, I don't want to say stagnant, but they're much more stationary in comparison in Capricorn all year, basically, sort of, pretty much. And right now with these planets at the end of Leo, they're quincunxing these planets, which makes sort of an odd situation. But a quincunx isn't. It does provide like some sort of conflict and some a disconnection, like I said in my last video, where it's two completely different things, but they're not like butting heads the way you would have in like an opposition or a square. So like you can kind of get away with doing your own thing. You can go the Leo route and just enjoy life and be more focused on the present and focused on yourself and your own life and having fun or pursuing your own personal interests, and and in doing so maybe sort of disobeying the government or disobeying the higher structure or whatever. But you could kind of get away with it just because the quincunx isn't a very strong aspect, if that makes sense. And that's why there are some aspects, but there's not a lot of like outer planet aspects right now. What's going on in the background, which is really more important, at least in my perception, is that these three planets, Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter in Capricorn, are all going retrograde, and they will continue to do so till September, till mid to late September. And then that's where everything sort of changes again a little bit. Yeah, what's happening now is, like I've said before, these three planets are getting, as they're all going retrograde, and as they're going retrograde, they're getting closer. And like I said before, they're coming close to a conjunction at a point of Capricorn, which is close to where we had the major conjunction in January of this year. So that's why various situations will resemble conditions we had in January, but not as extreme. So the main thing is COVID. Like I said before, I see COVID getting worse, and whether that's the disease itself or just people's reactions to it, or the whole situation around COVID, I see that getting worse and worse, and continuing to do so till late September. So you can see here September 19th, Jupiter becomes stationary. One by one, these three planets will become stationary and stationary direct. And that's where they're the closest to each other. And so right at that point, that's the second peak basically of the second wave of COVID. And this Virgo season, I see it being a little bit darker. There's more action happening in September than August. August is more, it's relatively uneventful, even though this is a very eventful year, so there's stuff happening all year. But in for the standard of 2020, August is relatively uneventful. Again, like I said, just because there's not a lot of major aspects, it's just dominated by the quincunx. Leo, quincunx, and Capricorn. That's kind of the most general, vague representation of the month of August this year. Yeah, but then going into September, or even late August, beginning of Virgo season, the planets will start to, well, I guess the Sun and Mercury will begin to trine Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter. And there's sort of different interpretations of that. I think it's interesting that happens pretty much at the same time that Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter come close to conjoining and go stationary direct. So right at the time where the peak of the second wave of COVID, the Sun makes a trine to those planets. I just can't find a good day. I think it's like late September actually. Well, I guess the Sun trines those planets first, and then as they're sort of going stationary. So that would be kind of an intense time, like mid to late September. Because these three planets are basically stationary, and they're pretty much as close as they're going to get to each other. So it's the peak of the second wave, right as the Sun makes a trine. And I so a lot of times like Saturn would represent the government and the sun would represent like the individual, and because they're in agreement, people might actually be in support of what the government's doing. Like the government might actually be more responsive in a way that people agree with, or and that could be good or bad. I mean, it depends on your views on things, but maybe it's the people persuading the government, or maybe it's the government persuading the people. But there's some kind of harmonious relation there, which is kind of interesting. Thinking that right at the peak of the second wave, that's I don't know how to interpret that exactly. I don't know what might happen, but to me, it just seems kind of like a darker aspect because these three planets being so close to each other all year is to me embodies COVID and this whole situation, and the control, the the fact that the government, different factions of the government have used COVID to try to assert control. Everything surrounding that whole situation to me is embodied by this conjunction. So the fact that's trining the sun and getting support from people, I could see it as either people, sort of falling for it and supporting that control mechanism, or maybe that control mechanism being weakened a bit and people responding positively to that. But there's some kind of meeting of halfway or some kind of agreement between the people and the government in that area around mid to late September. And that's really the main event that's happening in the near future. I just don't see much happening for the rest of August. I know Dan's saying like he doesn't know what's happening in the astrology, but I just don't really pay attention to a lot of these smaller aspects anymore. The most significant thing is happening, is just this triple conjunction. But again, it's pretty much just like a normal new moon, but just a little bit more potent with the conjunction with Mercury and trine with Mars. Um, yeah, I don't. I mean, that's all I really see. Um, so yeah, so pretty much just rest of August is, and rest of Leo season and rest of August is relatively quiet. Um, and things get more intense, but somehow more harmonious going into September and going into Virgo season. And I don't know how that might play out. Mars though is right now is stationing retrograde, and it's squaring these three planets, but specifically Saturn. So there's tension there. The Aries Capricorn square is always a very tense one. Um, that could be like the military represented by Mars being in a conflict with the rest of the government represented by Saturn. That's one representation of it. It would be sort of a hard battle because, I mean, well, Saturn's retrograde, but it moves pretty slowly, so it's very intense. And then Mars being stationary is very intense, and Saturn's in domicile in Capricorn, while Mars is in domicile in Aries. So that there could be some intensity going on, with the government, with the military situations in the world. Um, um, yeah, and then I guess I could look more at the Mars retrograde. See, Mars should go stationary pretty soon. Oh, it actually doesn't till September 11th. Well, September 10th. September 9th. September 9th. Hmm. So, yep. Hmm. Oh, we've got the sun opposite Neptune. But I mean, that happens every year. It's not a really big deal. I don't know. There's just not much going on. Leo. I mean, yeah, because it's not. I said this last year too. It's not the most Leo season, if that makes sense. It's not the most happy, fun Leo season we've ever had because there's just not a lot of. If we had like, I guess last year at least Jupiter was in Sagittarius, so that would trine the Sun in Leo, but we don't have that. There's Mars, but that's still an inner planet. None of the other planets are in fire at all. So there's just um like Mars is supportive of these three planets, but I just feel like it's kind of fleeting. It's a fleeting fire because these are more quickly moving planets. They're not even Mars is slowing down in Aries, but you don't have that really heavy long-term support of an outer planet. And the moon leaves Aries just in a couple days, so and Mercury then does too. So yeah, there's just not much to report for Leo season. I mean, if anything, you could use it as a break. I think the news is relatively uneventful, even though there's so much pressure and so much pressure building up, and we're before this election, which is really important. If you just look at the day to day right now, it's relatively quiet, considering the times that we're in. Like, there's a lot of historical stuff happening surrounding this year, but just like day by day, the past, few days or couple weeks, it's relatively uneventful. So take advantage of that and maybe decompress a bit. Yeah, that's all I see really. Venus is approaching an opposition with Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter, so we could take a look. Okay, so starting like August 22nd, Venus begins to come into aspect opposing Jupiter, and then makes the exact opposition August 24th, and then it starts to oppose Pluto and Saturn as well. So late August, you could see some financial troubles, fluctuations in the stock market, or things going down. I hate to say that, and I don't think it's super extreme, but that's one manifestation of that. Venus and Jupiter are your benefic planets, of planets of abundance, and they're sort of at odds with each other. Venus isn't very supported in Cancer. It's trining Neptune, but then opposing these three planets. So it's all, I've pictured almost like a fight, and you're putting Venus against these three like big heavy planets. So it'd be kind of hard for Venus to be supported that way. So and because it's in Cancer, the focus is on, well, you could just see it as like financial commodities and stuff like that taking a dip or a dive or struggling in some way. You could also see it as the what people have pleasure in might be emotional, like emotional comforts, or some things that we're familiar with we would be extra comfortable with, or we would desire things that are close to us, like people that we already know very well, or our favorite TV show that we've watched a bunch of times, or your old favorite book or whatever movie. um those sorts of things are what would be more satisfying at this general time, but that's all being challenged by current events and society and politics and the larger situation in the world and everything. That's all challenging that emotional security and those emotional comforts, as well as just financial commodities and stuff like that. So that's something that's going on in late August. Oh, I should say there's almost a grand trine. Now that I think about Uranus, it's definitely not exact to the degree or to the aspect, but just by sign. Um, Once we get into Virgo, there is a kind of loose trine between the Sun and Mercury in Virgo, with Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter in Capricorn, with Uranus in Taurus. But I mean, Uranus is 7 degrees away from trining Jupiter, so it's a little bit far, and then it's a full 15 degrees away from trining Saturn, so I wouldn't even really count that. But there could be some kind of. It's kind of difficult for me to interpret, because I see it as mostly being a negative thing. I just do. I just see it as a sort of second wave of COVID. But at the same time, there's these trines, these Earth trines. So, um, and then you've still got Venus opposing Saturn. So, I see almost a contradiction of like maybe some harmony in financial situations with all these Earth trines. But at the same time, Venus is generally the planet of money and abundance, and it's being opposed by Saturn still. So maybe different aspects of our financial situation are good, but also bad. Like maybe they're printing out enough money to support everybody for now, but there's also a lot of problems going on. So there's kind of a fleeting prosperity going on. Um, I maybe the government actually being more supported and supportive and actually being more effective, but I don't know. It just seems off to me though. I don't know why. I mean, part of it's kind of funky just because not only are Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter all retrograde during this time, but also Uranus is retrograde. So, and Uranus also rules the individual or the common people, and that's not really trining, but almost kind of trining, at least by sign with these planets. So it's almost like there's some fleeting harmony there between, just within our society as a whole. But then it's during the second wave of COVID, so I don't know how to interpret that. So I'm kind of giving you this not really fully processed, but that's just what I see. I don't know what's gonna happen. Um, Again, like I've said, Saturn and Capricorn things are kind of more condensed until December. Um, and I mean that's kind of a ways away, but everything changes in December, and I think that's where, well, yeah, like I've said, things will either get really good or really bad, whatever. Because the age of Aquarius, when you go from an Earth phase to an air phase, things get really crazy, and that can be in a good way or a bad way, or it could be a lot of different things. The air phase gets really chaotic, so that's what we're kind of building up to. Um, and yeah, things do change after September. I I almost see one positive thing would be that I've said that this near conjunction between Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter in Capricorn in September is generally a negative thing, the way I see it. But it does sort of, what's the word? It like dissipates after that. So like going into October, the planets are pretty close. So I mean, going through October, it would still be the kind of the peak of the second wave. But after that, um, whoa, what just happened? Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Um, Going after that, going into November. Okay, they are kind of actually moving all together, but then things change once you get into December because Jupiter and Saturn enter Aquarius, and Pluto doesn't make it, but Jupiter and Saturn continue on and kind of ditch Pluto there. So, I haven't even looked at this. I'm being such a terrible astrologer right now, but I just wanted to put out something for Dan, I guess. But hopefully this is helping. I'm kind of tired, but okay. So November. Okay, so I thought I was under the impression that these three planets kind of went their separate ways after they go direct, but it actually makes sense that they, especially since they're outer planets, they slowly go retrograde and then they very slowly come to a halt, and then go direct and very slowly begin to accelerate forward. So they kind of, through October and November, they kind of moved more or less together. So that conjunction is still, um, okay. So the way I see that in politics is, it kind of makes sense that this whole second wave COVID thing is going to be they're gonna really drive it hard into us until the election. Basically, that fits pretty neatly. Well, even after the election, even late November, they're all pretty close. So you know, the media is saying that everything is terrible, and trying to really play this COVID thing to get Trump out of office. That's the way I see it. Or if you believe in COVID, then the second wave is really terrible and it's really bad, and we're going into cold and flu season. In fall and all through fall, COVID is really bad supposedly. Okay, something like that. Whatever the COVID situation is, I don't know whether to be partial or not, impartial or not, but yeah. But then, like I said, that situation dissipates. I think it dissipates once Saturn and Jupiter enter Aquarius, because the paradigm totally shifts. Like that whole thing is abandoned, and it either turns into something completely different, or it just kind of fizzles out, and then something totally different happens, which makes everybody forget about that and move on to the new thing. And I don't know what the new thing is gonna be. Um, it's gonna be it's gonna be like what happened in January, in the sense that when the huge conjunction happened on January 12th, 2020, nothing happened like that day that most people were aware of. And that's common with conjunctions. But then going into the days and weeks and months after that, you could see that there was actually a lot going on at that time, but we just didn't know it. A lot of stuff was beginning at that time. You just didn't see it yet. Kind of like a new moon. You don't see it when it's new. During the moon sun conjunction, you don't see the moon. You only see later that, oh, it actually started then. Okay, so it's the same thing with the Jupiter Saturn conjunction. This is going to be a big deal. And my interpretation would be, whoops. So December 19th, I don't think there's going to, I could be wrong. I should knock on wood, but I don't think there's going to be a huge event on December 19th when the Jupiter Saturn conjunction happens at 0 degrees Aquarius. It will only be later that you'll see that that date marks the beginning of a new phase, a very new phase. Oh yeah, technically December 21st, but that general time period. Yeah, something new happens. And the way I see it is it's going to be more positive. It's going to be more about what the people want. So as long as there's enough people in the population who have valid beliefs and some degree of enlightenment, and the power of prayer or of mindfulness or of imagination or of law of attraction, it will work to the extent that we will start to create our own world going after the winter solstice this year. So as long as what people want is truly good and we're not buying into false paradigms, we should see some major improvements in the world after the winter solstice, going into next year. And there's going to be a lot of political changes going into 2021. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. But anyway, that's all I see right now. Right now, like I said, August, there's just not much going on, to be honest. That's just what I see. There's not much going on. I mean, I just don't really see that very much point into getting into these little aspects anymore. Because they affect everyone differently. The more personal they are, the more personal they are, so it affects everyone differently. So, if I was looking at an individual person's chart, I could see how, the positions of, like this conjunction in Leo trine Mars would affect you, but I think it'd be different for everyone personally. Yeah, but in general, it'd be nice to get some fire since we've been lacking that. September, things continuing to get more pressurized. Things continue to get more pressurized from now till late September, early October. Things continuing to be pressurized from late September, early October through basically the election in November, and then, or even after that, and then everything changing in December again, but in a different way. So I hope that helps. I hope that gives you something to go off of. Um, I could give you some dates just for. Actually, I wrote them on my calendar, which is right here. So you've got. So the new moon. Oh, it's actually not on there. Okay. But I can look right here. So okay, new moon in Leo is August 18th at 26 degrees of Leo, and then 1 week after that you'll have the first quarter moon. So right there. So August 25th you'll have a first quarter moon at about 3 degrees Sagittarius. And then 1 week after that you'll have the full moon in Pisces. This video is such a mess. So the full moon would be at about 13 degrees Pisces on September 3rd. Or wait, no. Sorry. It'll be 10 degrees Pisces September 1st. Full moon. And I don't think it's aspecting anything. It's actually aspecting Uranus. The sun is trining Uranus, moon is sextiling Uranus, so that's nice. So there could be a pleasant surprise with the full moon. The full moon, September 1st, is all about combining Virgo stuff with Pisces. So, physical health with mental health, or that's like the main theme of it. If you could, like, reading is the perfect thing for combining Virgo with Pisces, because you're doing something very tangible, and reading is kind of a Virgo thing, but then you're imagining, reading fiction, so you're imagining being in a different world. So that's a super great way. Or like meditation is a really great way where you're, it's something physically healthy, but also emotionally healthy, or intuitively healthy, or like hiking or something, enjoying nature. Meditation, something where you're doing like art or reading or writing, or it could even be something like sports, or like going on a long jog or something like that. Something where you can kind of just zone out and like appreciate whatever you're doing and get lost in whatever you're doing. That would be good for September 1st. But yeah, because Uranus is aspecting it, there might be some unpredictable surprises, but it should be really positive because it's making a harmonious aspect to the sun as well as to the moon. So, and that's really the only planet aspecting to the full moon. So, and then going into September, I already covered everything. Gemini quarter moon. Oh, I actually did write this down. So the third quarter moon in Gemini, 18 degrees Gemini on September 10th. And that's actually making a T-square with Neptune. And the moon, and it happens at the same time that the sun is squaring the nodes. So that's kind of a weird day, I guess. September 10th, the moon is quincunxing Saturn as it conjoins the nodes, conjoins the north node, and makes a T-square with the sun at 18 degrees Virgo and Neptune at 19 degrees Pisces. So that's kind of a little bit of a clusterfuck aspect. Nothing like historically monumental or anything like that, but it could be definitely some weird situations that, again, people would experience it different ways, but having probably like a little crossroads, because you are bringing fate, that fated aspect into the mix with the nodes. So like this, when a planet squares the nodes, there's this sort of turning point, or there's this sort of little mini crisis involving the path that you're on, or something like that. So especially since the sun is squaring the moon and it's a third quarter moon, there might be a crisis in consciousness. That's what I see. a lot of nervous energy. You're combining Neptune and Pisces, which is confusing and mentally and emotionally unstable, mixing that with the Sun in Virgo, which is setting the main focus, but it's at odds with the nodes. So kind of a weird faded plot twist energy, and then mixing Moon, which is at least conjunct the North node, so that's positive, but just a very scattered energy because you're combining these multiple mutable signs. So September 10th is, I think it's kind of a create your own adventure thing. I think it'd be very different for everyone, but it's generally very scattered and confusing, and some plot twist energy. Nothing super monumental or life changing unless it aspects you personally. If you have planets at 18 or 19 degrees mutable signs, it would affect you very personally, but in general, it's enough to be noteworthy, but nothing super game changing. Okay, I really said all that I could say, I think, so hopefully that's interesting. It's something at least, and yeah, I mean, I think I've pretty much laid out the rest of this year. The only thing I haven't explored is October and November. I haven't explored in super fine detail, but that's the main thing that's going on is that second wave in September and October. You know, so enjoy if things are relatively quiet. I know that things are still intense, but if things are relatively quiet right now, just enjoy it because it will get a lot more intense September, October, November, even and then December, but everything changes in December. Okay, so hopefully that helps, and um, I'm making a video about the Uranus cycle, so I'm hoping to post that soon. It's just hard when I'm working all the time because I'm tired. But yeah, so hopefully I'll have that up soon. Okay, bye.